Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. And today is a special day. Today is Giving Tuesday Now, and it is a day all around the world where we are focusing on nonprofit institutions and organizations that are doing our best right now. The Aquarium of the Pacific is one of them, doing our best to still provide great educational programming and great care to all of the animals that live here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. And we know a number of you have asked about wanting um, to contribute and donate to the aquarium, and so we wanted to let you know that there are ways that you can do it now. So there is. I'm going to ask you to visit our website because we don't have the sign that can show you what the words are. And so go check that out on our website so you can donate to the aquarium. But thank you for all of you who have been joining in for our Aquarium Online Academies. And if you would like to participate along with us today, I invite you, in fact, I encourage you to text in to us at the number that you do see on your screen at 562 286 1838 if you have any questions, because I would love to hear your questions as we talk about our topic for today, which is bioluminescence and the deep sea. So let's dig in. But before we dive in to the deep sea, I'd like to talk about what's been going on in the shallower parts of the ocean. Have you been hearing anything lately in the news, or maybe you've seen posts on the internet about what's been happening in our local Southern California waters? Well, if you've been out to the beach at night around here, or if you've seen pictures of people who have, you may have seen some waves that appear to be glowing. So, what is it that's causing these glowing waves? Well, we actually have a picture taken by one of my friends, Kira Mathis. And this is a picture of a boat right here in Long Beach. And you can see that water seems to be glowing. And this is not a filter. This is a picture of a boat just breaking through the water. You'll notice the rest of the water around it is not glowing. It's only where the boat is going through the water. So, what is that? Why is the water glowing? Well, it's bioluminescence. And what is bioluminescence? Well, bioluminescence is when a living organism, because bio for living, creates its own light. So luminescence is actually light that's being given off that isn't producing heat. So oftentimes if you turn on a light switch, you're going to get heat that comes out from that light. If you leave it on for a while, you'll feel the heat. But bioluminescence is light that's created by living organisms that doesn't produce a lot of heat. 20% or less of it is heat. So it's really efficient light. And how do organisms make it? Well, it's really interesting. Inside the bodies of different types of organisms, and I'll have you think about what type of organism might be causing this. Because to me, just looking at this picture, it looks like it's the wave itself. It looks like the ocean itself is glowing. But what is it that's in the ocean that's glowing? Well, the bioluminescent creatures, whether it be something small or something large, have two special things inside their bodies called luciferin and luciferase. Luciferin is a molecule, and luciferase is an enzyme. And when those two come together in the presence of oxygen, they can create a byproduct called oxyluciferin. And then the most exciting thing is they create light. And so that's what we're seeing from these organisms. And the organisms right here in the ocean are bioluminescing. And someone asked, is it plankton or algae that causes it? And that's kind of a trick question, or maybe I should say a trick answer, because it's both. What you're seeing here is caused by a type of plankton called dinoflagellates. And dinoflagellates are a type of plankton, but they're not plant and they're not animal. There's something in between, and they're basically like an algae. So like an algae, they're called protists is what they're called. But dinoflagellates are kind of like plants that can swim. So we think about animals moving around. We don't usually think about plants swimming. But that's kind of what a dinoflagellate is like. It's kind of like a plant-like organism with the ability to swim. But they are very small, very tiny. And when I say very small, think about the smallest thing you can think of. Well, let's think about a little strand of your hair. If you look at one piece of your hair and you look at the diameter, the round part of it, and you were to measure it across, that is what we call about the average human hair is about 50 micrometers or micrometers. And if you were to kind of cut that in half, that's about how big one of these dinoflagellates is. Actually, they're a little bit bigger than that. They're about 35 micrometers. So really super tiny. So for this much water to be glowing, for you to be able to see this much, that means there must be a lot, millions upon millions of these little dinoflagellates that are in the water. And what happens is as something goes through the water and kind of stirs and mixes it up, all these dinoflagellates create this bioluminescence. And why are they doing that? Well, it's probably to help them survive. Now, how would it help them survive? Because sometimes animals will use bioluminescence to create a distraction. So if something's about to eat them, they will shoot off some bioluminescence. So the animal's like, whoa, what just happened? And then it allows that other organism to get away and maybe be distracted during that time of confusion for the predator. So that means as that water is stirring and it's kind of disturbing the dinoflagellates, they're creating this glowing look in the waves that you see. All right, somebody said, are they harmed when they luminesce? And no, they are not harmed when they luminesce. Now, that does require some energy on their part, so it does use energy, and it doesn't last for very long. In fact, one little flash of bioluminescence from one of these little dinoflagellates here might only last 1/10 of a second. So obviously, for you to see a long, sustaining glow, there must be a lot of them that are all bioluminescing at the same time. But fortunately, it doesn't create harm for the animal. Someone said, is this happening because of overproduction of oxygen? Well, it's actually hard to know exactly why this is happening. In fact, these blooms, or this red tide is what we call this, are not things that can be predicted easily by scientists. Scientists are working very hard to try to predict when it's going to happen. But there are a couple different things that cause red tide. Let me get back to red tide. What is that? Well, red tide is something that makes the water appear like this reddish-brownish color, and it's due to the presence of these dinoflagellates. When dinoflagellates appear in great abundance in the ocean, they create, because their bodies themselves are kind of a reddish-brownish color, it makes the water appear that reddish-brownish color, and we refer to that as red tide. And these animals, these organisms, I should say, go up to the surface during the daytime, and they are actually producers. So when I say producer, think about, the food chain, and we think about plants being producers, taking energy from the sunlight and creating their own energy and food. Well, that's what these organisms do too. So they need to come up from the bottom of the ocean or wherever they are in the ocean, and during the daytime, they need to be at the surface getting all of their energy from the sun. Now, when they're all congregating up at the surface, if there's a lot of them, it makes that water like a reddish, brownish color. And so that's what we refer to as red tide. Now, it's also something you need to be aware of if you are planning on going to the water. I would not recommend going swimming during red tide because they can have toxins that if they were to get in your body, they might not make you feel very good. You could get sick. People have been known to get sick from eating animals that have been in the water during red tide. That's why there are certain times that they would say you don't want to eat shellfish. Shellfish, like animals like clams, that are filter feeders. As they're filtering water coming through the ocean, if there's dinoflagellates in the water that have toxins inside their body, it's going to build up inside that clam, and then when you eat it, you're going to get sick. So it's a building up. Bioaccumulation is what we call it, when there's lots of these little things, and as you go higher on up the food chain and you eat more of them, it builds up and it could make even a person sick. So beware of eating things from the water when there's a red tide. So dinoflagellates create red tide during the day and then bioluminescence at night. So very interesting organisms. So think about that. Those are pretty small organisms we were talking about. And the reason they're happening, getting back to finishing the answer to your question, is while some blooms of plankton can happen as a result, or blooms of algae can happen as a result of runoff from things coming down rivers and off of land, they believe that this red tide that we're seeing and this bioluminescence is due to a kind of a lessening of the upwelling that happens in the ocean. So as the winds are kind of backing down and they're not pushing some of the water away that it normally does, as that water moves away from the surface of the ocean, it brings up nutrients that are deeper down in the ocean. And right here in Southern California, we have very nutrient-rich waters, and it can support a lot of different types of sea life. And as that water comes up and things are mixing, it's great. But sometimes when it doesn't blow off and there isn't as much upwelling, it can create layers in the ocean. And these dinoflagellates can get caught in these layers. So instead of just being at the surface during the day and then going down further at night, well, they're staying up there so that we can see that bioluminescence at night. Now, this is actually a pretty amazing phenomenon that's happening. It's a pretty large thing from Baja California all the way up to Los Angeles area. And we have no idea how long it's going to last. There might be some places that are still getting really good views of this, and other places where maybe they're not seeing as much. But it's really fascinating, and we're learning more. We're trying to predict what it is when they might happen, but we still don't have it completely figured out yet. But scientists are working hard, learning what's going to cause those red tides to happen and those bioluminescent blooms that we see at night. But either way, it's very exciting to see. All right, so let's move on. We have the smaller organisms that create bioluminescence, but there's also larger organisms that can bioluminesce too. Can you think of any? Well, as you go down deeper, there are scientists who have found that different layers in the ocean tend to have different or more types of bioluminescent animals. And they found that one of the top surface layer ones that we see a lot of are sea jellies. So sea jellies are another example. Not all sea jellies can bioluminesce, but a number of them can. Now this one right here is a very special organism that has taught us a lot about bioluminescence. This is a species of jelly that we have learned if it is attacked by a predator or if it is disturbed for some reason and it's concerned about its life, it will actually flash out these bioluminescent glows all around the outside of its bell. So the top part of the jelly, that round area, is what we call the bell. And all of these flashes, this is just a still shot. If this animal, if we were seeing a video footage of it, you would see it flashing all the way from the inside all the way out and back and forth. So it's really beautiful and really vibrant. But what we discovered is that these animals will do this to be like a burglar alarm, to let other animals in the deep sea know that I am being attacked by something. There is something big in the water eating me. Hey, is there anybody else out there who would like a free meal and you can come get the thing that's eating me? And that's what it does. And so this is what we would call a burglar alarm, that these animals, and we found that it's not just jellies that do this, but other animals, when they're disturbed, possibly like the dinoflagellates as we were seeing them as the boat was breaking through the water, it was disturbing the dinoflagellates and they were glowing, well, causing a distraction and maybe advertising to other organisms to come on over and save them from whatever's trying to eat them. But there are some jellies that create their own bioluminescence. There are some jellies that look like they're glowing, but they're not actually. They're actually just sending, they're reflecting the light that's hitting them in a fluorescence. So let's talk about the difference between bioluminescence and fluorescence. This right here is a beautiful jelly called the flower hat jelly. Now the flower hat jelly has these beautiful colors on it, but you don't always see these colors. They have to be in the right sort of light. So you might wonder, well, why? What difference does that make? And why would animals in the ocean need to be seen under certain types of light? Well, think about how light travels. When we look at light, we are seeing all the colors of the rainbow, all these different wavelengths of light at one time, making up what we call white light. Now, if you take something like a prism, you can bend or refract the light into its different wavelengths. So then you can separate them and see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Well, in the ocean, as the light travels through the ocean, it's not as strong. And those red wavelengths can't get, the ones that are weaker, can't get all the way through to the bottom. And it's only the ones with the smaller wavelengths, like the blues and the purples, the violet, that can get down and reach the bottom of the ocean. So that means anything at the ocean that would normally be red in color, if you were to bring it to the surface, in the deep sea, it's going to appear red, or it's going to appear black very quickly, because the red wavelength can never reach down to hit that object and reflect it back to your eye as being red. Because if the red light can't get down there, the red wavelength can't get down there, you won't be able to see that color reflecting back to you. And so a lot of animals in the ocean are red, not to stand out and be vibrant, but to actually help them blend in. Whereas the blue color can be seen by more organisms in the ocean, which is why you'll also notice that bioluminescent color being very blue. But fluorescence again, if light is getting through to the ocean, some of the ultraviolet lights can travel down and can reach these organisms. And we know that if they are hit with these lights, they actually have something inside of their body that will show off a brighter color, and that's fluorescence. So fluorescence is not when something is creating its own light, but rather when it is reflecting back some other types of light. And fluorescence, you're going to see a lot of greens, a lot of green fluorescent creatures. So here's a fluorescent fish right here, and you can see those fluorescent eyes. And there are even types of sharks that have fluorescence. In fact, there's another local shark here called the swell shark that has been known to be fluorescent. And we didn't know that under certain lighting, they would appear green in color. And so while that might not affect us just swimming through the ocean, animals in the ocean can be aware of that and see it. So it's really interesting how these animals in an area that's normally pretty dark actually are utilizing light in very different ways. But again, this is the flower hat jelly, and it is a type of plankton as well, but it can be large. We have them here at the aquarium, and they're beautiful to watch, but it's only under certain lighting that you can see those really beautiful, vibrant colors. All right, now there was another jelly that was up here that you may have seen moving, and it almost may have looked like it had rainbow colors that were going up and down. Well, that jelly is not producing its own light either. And this is not a typical sea jelly. This is what we call a comb jelly. And they have these little cilia that are rapidly beating to help this jelly move. So instead of moving the big bell like regular jellies do up and down, they have these long lobes right here. And then they are powered through the ocean by these little cilia. They're like little tiny hairs that they're waving back and forth. And it can create what appears to be a rainbow color all throughout. It's not quite as clear in this particular video, but all in here along those little lines, when those are moving, sometimes you can see all the colors of the rainbow. But again, if it's not already, if there isn't light that's hitting them, they won't be glowing. So these are not bioluminescent here. They're just refracting the light that's hitting them, the ambient light, I should say, around them. So very interesting animals in the ocean. Now, of course, it's not just sea jellies and invertebrates and plankton that can bioluminesce. You also have fish that can bioluminesce. So we looked at that one fluorescent fish, but I want you to think about why a fish would want to bioluminesce. What would be the advantage of using bioluminescence in the deep sea? So as we said, as you go deeper in the ocean, the wavelengths from the sun can't travel as far, and eventually you're going to get to a place where there isn't any sunlight at all. And what we call the top part, that top layer of the ocean, the photic zone, is the first 200 meters, and that's where most of our sea life that we're familiar with lives. But once you get below that, you're not getting a whole lot of light coming through. So these animals are creating their own light. Now here are some pictures of some different animals that live in the ocean that can bioluminesce. Now, I do want to also let you know that even though they look kind of big and scary in this picture, most of these organisms are quite small. And you might recognize, well, actually, do you recognize any of these? You may have seen a movie that there is very popular about this fish that has this thing hanging down over its head to attract its prey over so it can eat it. Do you see any fish in this picture that look like they have something they might be using to attract prey over to them? Well, yeah. If you look down here, this one right here is an example of a type of anglerfish, as is this one right here. Now, I say anglerfish. An angler is someone who, like a fisherman, who uses a lure to attract the fish over to him, right? Well, this is their lure right here. This is their bait to attract something over. If it can light up in this very deep environment, or a very dark environment, excuse me, it's going to attract the attention of something that might want to wander on over and see what is it that's causing that. Well, then, as they get closer, obviously very close to this one, those teeth, and look at those teeth down here, can then gobble up that prey. So it's a great way of attracting food over to oneself. So that's one reason why they use bioluminescence in the ocean. But I want you to take a look at this fish down here. This hatchet fish is an interesting fish as well. Now, its bioluminescence is not hanging from the front of its head. It's actually on the underside of its body. And here's a closer view of what it looks like. These little photophores are what are producing this bioluminescent light for this fish on the underside. Now, why on the underside? Why nowhere else? Well, this is one of the ways that the fish can help itself to camouflage. You're like, why does it need to camouflage? It's in the deep sea. But a lot of these animals will make vertical migrations at night or at different times of the day. And you might see, if you get to a point where you see any light that's coming in from the top, well, having a lighter underside is going to help that animal to blend in better. It might be hard to envision, but I encourage you to do an internet search, look it up, and see how fish will use bioluminescence to help them to camouflage with the light above them, because it really is interesting how just turning on these little lights on their body helps them blend in so that they no longer are as obvious in the shadows. So it's definitely worth checking out, but they use that for their own protection to hide and maybe so that other organisms don't see them. But obviously these animals are kind of strange looking. I do want to point out this one right here. This is a cute one called the flashlight fish. Now the flashlight fish has some bioluminescence right here, some bioluminescent bacteria that's living right below its eye. And different kinds of flashlight fish have different ways of using that. Some actually have a flap that covers over the top of it. Some can basically, so they can turn on and off these little patches on their body. And one thing that flashlight fish will do is they'll turn on that little light and swim this direction, but then turn it off and then go the other way. And so it's a great way of kind of deceiving predators who might be looking for them, saying, hey, I think there's something going that way. And then they go on that way while the flashlight fish goes the opposite direction. They also have been known to use that little light to help them to see better in the ocean. Did you notice some of these? This one has a pretty big eye to help him take advantage of whatever light might be coming into him in the deep sea. But some of them might have some pretty small, this one has, his eyes are a little bit smaller. Some animals in the deep sea, they don't have a whole lot they need to see. And so they're just like, we don't need eyes at all. One person is asking, what do anglerfish eat? Okay, so anglerfish, they're not very picky eaters apparently. And they have been known to eat fish and crustaceans. But I guess when things get close enough, they're just wanting to take advantage of whatever's in front of them to eat it. So my guess is the things that are most attracted to that light are the fish and the crustaceans, specifically shrimp, are things that they like to eat. I think anglerfish, I will encourage you to look at this picture right here. I know it's not the prettiest picture in the world, but this right here, I want to point out something really interesting about it. Besides those big, huge teeth and that crazy little lure, it has this big, bulging body, so it can eat whatever comes in front, right? But then also there's this thing down here. It looks kind of like a crazy looking fin. Well, this is not a fin. This is actually a male anglerfish. This is a female anglerfish. So the female anglerfish is bigger and the male is smaller. And what he does is he'll attach himself onto the female and actually become part of her body. And so that way they are sure that they can be a family that stays together forever and produce lots of little baby anglerfish. But they will actually, she will kind of absorb him into her body. So it's a very interesting relationship that they have. But they got to take advantage of whatever opportunities come their way when it comes to finding a mate and making sure they all stay together. So this is the anglerfish. Very interesting picture. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so why else do they have bioluminescence? They use it to attract animals over to them so that they can eat them. They use it to also distract predators, as I mentioned. And this fish, or I'm sorry, this shrimp right here is another great example of one that will use bioluminescence to distract predators. So if an animal is getting close to it and it's getting spooked, it will actually produce, kind of like spit out this bioluminescence. And again, it's a distraction so that the animal trying to eat it gets confused. And they think, wait, what was that? When they're getting distracted by that bioluminescent light coming from the mouth of this shrimp right here. So we're going to see if we can show you any images of this. Look at how amazing that looks. Look at that big blue bomb right here. They're just like spewing out all of this bioluminescent light. Now, this is also something that's done by worms as well, and squid also will do this. So squid that live in the deep sea, oh, here's a great picture that kind of shows you different parts of it, the earlier parts and then the later parts as it is being released. But you can see all those different, the same shrimp as it's releasing that bioluminescence, kind of a slow motion from its body. Here's another bioluminescent worm. I can't tell you exactly what species it is, so don't ask. But again, another really interesting organism living on the deep parts of the ocean that can glow. Now, one thing we've learned is that it's not just a few creatures that can bioluminesce, but actually a lot of creatures. In fact, some scientists in some parts of the ocean, they say about 75% of the animals in the ocean have the ability to bioluminesce. And it's not just the fish either. It's not just the ones swimming around, it can also be corals. So this is a deep sea coral that has the ability to bioluminesce. Now think about the deep sea. Again, no sunlight is coming down to these organisms. So how are they getting what they need to survive? Well, plants will use energy from the sunlight to produce photosynthesis, or through photosynthesis, produce the oxygen, carbon dioxide they'll use around them so that these other organisms can have energy and create their own energy as well. Well, down here, they don't use plants. Instead, they're using bacteria. So it's that bacteria, and the bacteria uses chemicals. So bioluminescence is a chemical reaction, as we talked about earlier, luciferin and luciferase that create this glow in the water. Now, this is also another type of plankton called an ostracod. And an ostracod has been known to do little bursts of bioluminescence as well if something is trying to attack it. Now, we do something here at the aquarium in one of our classes where we take some ostracods. Now, they're not alive anymore. They're dried out ostracods. They're also called sea fireflies. And so if you look inside, this is a little bowl, and we just turn the lights off so you won't be able to see it. But there are little ostracods in there. And once we crush it up and we turn off the lights, if we add a little bit of water, you can see them glow. Do you notice that? So my friend Stewie here, he put in some water. You can see the pipette. He was using a little pipette, like a little dropper, to add the water and then kind of stir it around, and he sucks some up. So you may have seen some of that glowing water go up that pipette. But that's something that is caused by this organism right here. So inside their body, they have those two things. And when it's mixed up and then we add a little bit of water to it, you can see the glow. And we can do that right here in our classrooms. And it's something you can actually experiment around with at home, because I've been told that there is a spice, turmeric or turmeric, that you can use that has bioluminescent properties. But I think you need an ultraviolet light to see it. So if you do a little search online, you might be able to learn more about how you might be able to see some bioluminescence at your own home. So anyhow, ostracod, also known as a deep sea firefly, is what this organism is right here. All right, well, we are nearing the end, but I think there is still a few questions that are coming in. So we have a question from Laura. She says, do male anglerfish stick onto the female at birth, or do they eventually find each other? All right, good question. Well, they do. They're not born together. They don't find each other at birth. They do actually find each other somehow in the ocean. I don't know what their method is for doing it. But the females, well, actually, I can tell you, because Stacy's helping me out here. Females let out a pheromone, which is a smell, to lead the male to her. And she will also flash her bioluminescent lure to help him find her. So they're using that lovely lure right here. She's waving it around, saying, here I am. And then the male finds her and attaches on. So it's through smell. So she's got to smell really good to him. And then flashing her bioluminescent lure. So I don't know if that's like flashing your eyelashes, something like that. So thank you for that question. All right. Now, I do want to point out another picture that we have here of a bobtail squid. So this is a pretty cute looking animal. I want to point him out just because he's cute. And this is found in the deep parts of the ocean as well. And they have a light organ inside of them that, again, is using bacteria. So the bacteria that they use to help light up to attract animals to their mouth, actually, is something that happens within the first couple hours of life. So within the first couple hours of life, bacteria settle on them so that this bioluminescent bacteria that they can use to attract animals over to help them find their prey. Even though they do have some very big eyes, you can see that. But I just think they're really cute. This one's got all of his little tentacles, little arms tucked underneath his body. But another neat example of how not all organisms will produce their own light themselves with the lucifer and luciferase, but will also take advantage of the bacteria to create the light that they see. All right, well, we are out of time today. Thank you so much for your questions. And also wanted to remind you, if you still have questions, if you're watching this later, you can text us at live@lbaop.org, and we will be happy to respond to your questions at that time. And again, today, because it is Giving Tuesday, we want to invite you to consider helping the aquarium so that we can continue doing programs like this because we are really happy to be able to do it. And we also are really happy that we can provide the care that all these 12,000 animals at the aquarium need on a daily basis, and they're working hard. But thank you for joining us. Feel free to join us anytime from your computer by using our webcams like the one you see here. This is our tropical reef habitat. And checking out the other resources that we have available for you on our website. So thank you again for joining us today, and have a wonderful day. Bye.